It takes energy. It takes courage. It takes commitment. A hunger to live life at another level. A life of true fulfillment. Welcome to the Extraordinary Living Podcast, where Jackie Senatori interviews leading experts from around the world, extracting their wisdom, giving you the tools, tips, and tricks on how to go from ordinary to extraordinary. Get ready to start living a healthier and more empowered life. Here she is, your host, Jackie Senatori.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Extraordinary Living Podcast. Today, I'm super excited to introduce one of my favorite world leaders. He's influenced my life more than anyone else. His name is Dr. John Demartini. Dr. Demartini is a world-renowned specialist in human behavior, a researcher, author, and global educator. He has developed a series of solutions applicable across all markets, sectors, and age groups. His education curriculum ranges from corporate empowerment programs, financial empowerment strategies, self-development programs, relationship solutions, and social transformation programs. His teachings start at the core of the issue, addressing human factor, and range out to a multitude of powerful tools that have proven the test of time. He has studied over 30,000 books across all the defined academic disciplines and has synthesized the wisdom of the ages, which he shares on a stage in over 100 countries. His presentations, whether keynotes, seminars, or workshops, leave people and clients with insights into their own behaviors and the key to their empowerment. He's personally changed my life and thousands of others. I use his tools every single day. I'm honored and excited to welcome him to the show. Hi, Dr. Demartini.
Howdy, howdy.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I want to give you a little context of why I wanted to bring you on the show. Is I've been one of your students for many years now. And anytime life kind of handed me a challenge or something that created, as I call, like a growth opportunity, the breakthrough experience, one of your signature programs, is where I would go, and the most kind of fast and efficient way to reorganize something and get kind of the gifts out of it. So just to give listeners a little bit of context, could you just share what the breakthrough program that you offer is?
The breakthrough experience, as it stands today, is a 2-day experience where I've been doing it now for 1,113 times. I've done it in 65 countries to over 100,000 people. And it is a program designed to help people take command of their lives and not let extrinsic distractions interfere with a very inspiring, spontaneously emerging yearning to want to do something that makes a difference. So what I do is I show people how to empower the primary areas of life. In other words, to help their mind become more empowered, help their career become more empowered, their financial position, their relationship position, their social leadership position, their physical well-being, and their whatever inspires them, their spiritual tradition. And I do that through principles and methodologies that I've developed and gathered over the last almost 8 years, and put it into educational and practical methodologies that people can do to break through anything that they perceive in the way of doing something extraordinary with their life. So it's 2 full days, intense days of philosophical, psychological, physiological, in-depth exploration of how your mind, body, and inspiration work, and then how to empower these areas and how to not distract yourself by exaggerating people or minimizing people, trying to change you relative to others, others relative to you, and how to take and have to prioritize your life, delegate lower priority things, and get on with what is most meaningful. It's about breaking through whatever's stopping you from what you want to do in life, basically.
It's such an extraordinary program because every time I've attended, or anytime somebody goes, you get something different. You deepen your skill set. I really just don't think of all the people that I've even brought to your breakthrough, life is ever really the same. You can't really look at life the same anymore because what I think is that we're all seeking pleasure without a pain. And you are someone that kind of busted through the myths of positive thinking and that we should always be positive and that life should always go this sort of way. So could you talk a little bit about the idealisms that what is a fantasy and why we kind of create this one-sided way of wanting to be?
There's a somewhat of a hierarchical structure in our brain, and we have layers. You might say chronological and historical layers to some degree, but efficiency layers for sure. The forebrain is involved in foresight. The hindbrain is hindsight. The forebrain is more objective and reasonable. The hindbrain is more emotional and irrational. The forebrain sees things with reason and is able to transcend bias, and the amygdala and hindbrain area is filled with bias, survival mechanisms. One is thrival, forebrain, one is survival. The thrival one sees things balanced, and it poises us instead of poisons us. And it makes us prioritize things. And when we go into a subcortical area, in the hindbrain area, we are emotional, and we want to avoid predator and seek prey. It's like an animal. And we want to avoid challenge and seek ease and support. And we want to avoid pain and seek pleasure, as Freud would call it. And that's when we pursue that which is unobtainable, pleasure without pain. And that's when we try to avoid that which is unavoidable, pain without pleasure. And when we attempt to do that, we have a futility instead of a utility in the world. And so, as the Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, and many other great minds have depicted through the years, if we are willing to embrace both sides of our own life, both sides of reality, and both sides of other people's lives, we have realistic expectations that are true objectives and not fantasies. But a fantasy is an assumption that there's going to be more positives than negatives, and a nightmare is an assumption there's going to be more negatives than positives. And a reality is that there's always both. All magnets have two sides and a pair of opposites. And life is that way. So I try to teach people how to transcend those immediate gratifying urges and impulses of looking for one side, which interferes with being able to embrace both sides. Imagine trying to get rid of half of your own life all your life. Imagine trying to fix other people into making them one-sided when they can't be. And imagine setting fantasies instead of objectives. They're self-defeating. So in the breakthrough experience, I do what I can with my methodology, the Demartini method, which I introduced there, to help you see rationally, reproducibly, scientifically, that it's futile to set fantasies and confuse those with true objectives that are obtainable. So I'm a firm believer in setting realistic objectives in life. Objectivities means neutral and balanced and unbiased and non-partial and whole. And I'm a firm believer in setting real objectives in life. You have more fulfillment in life. If you can't have fulfillment trying to get rid of half of life.
And a big part of that is relationships, whether it's intimate relationships or business relationships or just a parent to a child. You really teach on how important it is to effectively communicate in one another's values. So what's going on in the world right now is really affecting relationships with COVID and people really kind of being stuck at home together and really seeing the partner that they're with or these family dynamics and wanting someone just to get along all the time or being irritated by this trait of your partner, wanting them just to be nice to you and supportive to you. What do you see out of like all your breakthroughs in teaching kind of so many thousands of people is the most challenging aspects of relationship and why they break down and how using your method can really help people learn to communicate more effectively and see how one another being different is actually on the way and not in the way?
Every human being lives moment by a set of priorities, a set of values, things that are most to least important in their life. And it's like a fingerprint. It's unique and specific. It's evolving, but it's unique at any moment in your life. Anytime you perceive things supporting that value, you tend to label it positive, look up to it, and attract to it. Anytime you see something challenging it, you tend, with your animal nature, to avoid it, look down on it, think it's negative. So you polarize based on your values. You, in a sense, project your evaluations onto things and label them. Now, these are subjective biases. They're not truths, because somebody with a completely different set of values will see the same event or the same individual from a different light and may see what you think is negative as positive or positive or negative. So what you may be thinking is supportive, they may think is challenging, and vice versa. But it's your bias. And anytime you perceive something that's got support without challenge, you're going to be attracted to it. You may put it up on a pedestal and praise it. And when you see things that challenge, you may look down on it and reprimand it, criticize it. So when you're in a relationship with somebody, each individual you're in a relationship with, whether it be spouse or children or friends or colleagues, they have a unique set of values. And whatever's highest on their value, whatever's most important to them, they are spontaneously committed to fulfilling. And that is what their identity revolves around. That's what their life focus is. That's what their mission is revolving around. And they want to fulfill that. They want fulfillment. So if you cannot see how what they're dedicated to and what's inspiring to them spontaneously and what they're, you might say, committed to and what they're fulfilled by is helping you fulfill what's important to you, your highest value. If you can't see how their highest value is helping you fulfill what your highest value is, or vice versa, you're going to want to change them arrogantly and have futility and try to get them to live in your values, which is futile. Or you're going to try to, if you're infatuated with them, try to change you to be with them. And you're going to end up resenting that. And you're going to try to live in their values, which is futile and not possible. Nobody can live in somebody else's values long term. Only temporarily during a moment of infatuation you might try, but it's not sustainable. So a relationship dynamic is enhanced by caring enough, respecting enough, and in a sense, probing enough to find out what they're really committed to, what there really is inspiring and important to them, and finding out how it serves you. So you don't have to fix them, because when you love them and appreciate them for who they are, they turn into who you love. That's what they want. Every human being wants to be loved and appreciate who they are, and who they are revolves around what they value most. If you help them by appreciating that and help them get that, they will not want to leave you. They're going to want to stay with you, and you can create a lasting relationship. Everybody's a customer. They have their values, their dominant buying motives, and they're buying ideas and activities according to their values. And if you help them fulfill what they would love in life, they'll turn around and help you fulfill what you would love.
And is that where relationships really start off, like when you have what they call like the honeymoon phase of wanting to see the similarities in each other and see how you guys get along? And then after years, or the 5-10 year mark, where your roles kind of change. A woman can become a mother, and then her kids become maybe more important, or they start, what you say is like actually living their values. Is there a way that you can be, I'm going to put like feminine and masculine energies, and being opposite? So if a man values something that a woman doesn't, is there a way they can both be fulfilled and be true to their values, not having to live the other person's?
There's a common illusion out there that you need to sacrifice to be in a relationship. And I'm not sure that that's wise, because my experience is anytime somebody feels that they're having to sacrifice for you, they store that in their subconscious memories, and they'll download it on you later when you pushed enough buttons. Right. So you really didn't get anywhere. You end up paying for it in the long run. And they're basically keeping an ongoing inventory of everything they did for you and what you did for them. And they're both biased in their own favors. And so that really doesn't work. But by taking the time and asking a very simple question, how specifically is what my partner is dedicated to? How is it helping me fulfill what I'm dedicated to? How specifically what's most important to them, helping me fulfill what's most important to me? And if you make that accountable and actually answer that question, the more answers you have, the more you deeply appreciate them for who they are and don't need to fix them. I worked with a lovely lady yesterday. This is a fun one. And she just had a new baby. It's 2 months old. And she had fantasy, unrealistic expectations on him being a certain way now that the baby's here. Of course, he never demonstrated that before, but she had a fantasy that was now expecting it. When he didn't live up to it, she started getting anger. Anytime you project your values and fantasies and unrealistic expectations on another individual, you're going to have anger and aggression. You're going to want to blame them and feel betrayed. You're going to want to criticize them and feel challenged. You're going to want to feel despaired and depressed. You're going to want to exit and escape. You're going to want to feel futile and frustrated. You're going to have grouchiness and grief, hatred and hurt, and irritability and insanity, because you're expecting them to live outside their own values and in yours. Well, she had those. So I asked her a simple question. So let's imagine that he was to do exactly what you fantasize. And she goes, okay. And she smiled.
Right.
I said, now, what would be the downsides and drawbacks to you? At first, she said, well, I can't think of any. I said, think. Get beyond your emotional bias and look. Oh, well, he wouldn't be able to go and make some money during the day. Okay, great. What else? Another drawback for you is doing what you fantasized. I would be dependent, and I'd like to keep a part of my independence. Good. What's another drawback? We started looking at that, and she hit a point where all of a sudden tears came out of her eyes. And she realized that the reason she was angry is because she was comparing her current reality to a fantasy about how life was supposed to be. When I cracked the fantasy by balancing it, making her objective and look at the downsides to it, she started to appreciate her reality and saw the upsides. And then I asked him, what's another benefit of him being the way he is? He says, well, he shows the affection and a thing in his own values. I said, well, that's all you'll ever expect from somebody. They can't live in your values. And you are being self-righteous and looking down on him and trying to fix him, which is alienating him, which is then defying the very thing you say you want from him. She goes, oh my God, I knew I had to call you.
True.
Within about 40 minutes, I'd say 40 minutes, she was in tears. And right when she got in tears, amazingly, the door opened and he walked in and came in with the baby because he was holding the baby and walking around with the baby while she was on this consult, and said, you're not going to believe this. He just looked up and smiled and just did something for the first time and came and shared it with her. And then he says, I just had to share it with you. Pardon me for interrupting, but I had to share it with her. He was just blown away by this new activity that occurs in a 2-month-old, and then walked out. And she was in tears, and she goes, he just wanted to share with me a special moment with my baby with him. And she just broke down in tears and she says, I think I've been expecting him to be me. But if any two people are exactly the same, one's not necessary. You know, if you were married to yourself, you would end up in the twilight zone. You'd kill yourself within a short period of time. So know that complementations of opposites and all relationships strive for an androgynous state of opposites. So if you're highly polarized to business, finance, and intellect, you'll probably get somebody highly polarized into consuming, physical, family, and social issues. These pairs of opposites, these testosterone, estrogen dynamics, even though you may be right in the middle, unless you're in the middle and they're in the middle, then you're fine. But if not, if you're polarized, nature's going to bring you that other polarity to make sure you face the parts of disownment that you're unwilling to face in your own life. That's why I do the Demartini method in the breakthrough experience, to ask the question, what specific trait, action, inaction do you perceive in this individual displaying or demonstrating that you despise most? Okay, well, he's doing this. Okay, then you go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same behavior. If you do and stack it up until it's quantitatively, qualitatively equal, you realize that, oh my God, he's reminding me of a part of myself that I have been ashamed of, and I'm now resenting him because he's bringing it out of me, and I don't want to face that because I want to be addicted to my pride. And so the relationship is doing exactly what it's designed to do, to force you to mature, integrate, own both sides of your life, and learn how to love. And love is not one-sided. Love is the embracing of both sides synchronously.
That's so beautiful. You know, that's one of my favorite sayings that I tell people is if both of you are the same, one's not necessary, because you wouldn't grow. It's sort of like we just all want easy, and we want that relationship to be like effortless and no conflict, but then there's no, I know it's not passion, but then there's no spark. There's no anything to do if it was just boring like that.
Did you see last month the Asian woman that was divorcing her husband because he would refuse to argue, refuse to conflict, refuse to have anything? She said it was so boring, I couldn't handle it, and I'm divorcing him because he won't fight with me. It went all over the news, viral. And I thought, perfect. I put it in my one of my programs as an example of what's possible. People have a fantasy that the greener pastures on the other side, if I could just have a peaceful relationship, I'd be fine. But peace is not the answer. A combination of cooperation, competition, peace and war, support and challenge, and all other pairs of opposites is where we maximally grow. We grow most at the border of chaos and order. We need both.
Thanks to you, when I went through that divorce, that breakthrough, you really helped me crack the fantasy. And I don't know if you remember this, but of that June Cleaver life of I wanted the kids and the house and the walks at 5:30 that you started laughing. And it really broke the fantasy and showed me where the pain was coming from, because that's not what I was meant for. I just had created this picture, and that's where the pain was stemming from. And when I coach a lot of women going through divorce, a lot of the times it's life shifts somewhere. So whether there's a health challenge that came up or a death in the family and your partner goes through a hard time, would you ask those same questions instead of just getting divorced and wanting to look for the greener side of somebody else who might be younger or doesn't have that illness or didn't have kids yet? Can you reorganize that just for a period of time? So if someone becomes sick, is the same question, do you ask yourself the same question? How is them being depressed serving me? Or what would you do in that circumstance?
If we get too much support and similarities, we get bored. If we get too much challenge and dissimilarities, we get burned out. And somewhere in between boredom and burnout is where we can sustain.
Okay.
I tell people, you're the perfect balance of boredom and burnout, babe. But what that means is you may have a point where your willingness to grow, your resilience and adaptability is overwhelmed, and you'll say enough is enough. And you're going to have to put too much work and effort into the integration of those pairs of opposites. And you'll say, I'd like to try this with another person. But what's wise is understanding the conservation principle. I'm going to say something here, and everybody has to wrap their head around it. But I've demonstrated this and proven this to people, and I did it with this lady yesterday. I asked her the very trait that you're disliking about him prior to meeting him, who is displaying it? And she said, my roommate. And who is displaying it before her? One of my teachers and a friend. And who is displaying before that? Definitely my mom. And who was before that? Well, my mom was that was my mom. And I said, can you see that trait, action or inaction, has been in your life throughout your life? Because, Now, have you ever been away from your husband for a period of time? Yes. What's the longest? 2 weeks. Who displayed that then? Oh, yeah. When I was at a conference and there was a person at the seminar that was just driving me batty. And I said, so even when you were only temporarily away, you saw that form was there. So I never thought about that. Now take a trait you admire about him. Okay. And but prior to him, who was doing that? Trace it back. And when you've been away from him, who was doing that? And what I try to explain to him is that you're going to have a conservation of all the traits in your life. Any trait you haven't owned, you're going to react to. And you're going to either have it hook you by attracting you or repelling you. And either way, it's you. It's about your own issues. It's not about them. And they're just in the life. And whatever you try to run away from, you'll keep running into. Whatever you seek, you'll attract its opposite to break your addiction to that which you seek. Because whatever you seek, which keeps you comfortable, which is too much similarities, doesn't make you grow. So you need the opposite. So if you seek protection, you attract aggression. You seek ease, you attract difficulties. You seek control, you get out of control events. Nature automatically keeps you growing at the border. So I tell people that if all of a sudden your husband is doing something that's challenging you now, look at where all the support is occurring. You may find out that your business is on the boom, your social life is on the climb, and they're all giving you praise, and your husband's having to balance it by the reprimand. And then you may have found out that when all of a sudden you had all the praise from your husband in the first few weeks or months, maybe, your business was on the blink and your social life was been distracted. And then you realize that you didn't gain anything. It just morphed and transformed. I tell people that the master lives in a world of transformation, never the illusions of gain and loss. So keep your eyes open for all the traits throughout your life, and you're way more resilient and adaptable, and you don't put false expectations on any one person. I call it the law of the one-to-many. All the traits will be in your life either through one concentrated individual or dispersed through many individuals, diluted, but the traits will be conserved, and they're there to test you what you can embrace, because it's all you. It's all a reflection of yourself.
Just that in itself has been life-changing. As you know, I went through a divorce trial and people would ask me, how are you still doing it? How are you resilient? And it's that principle that you just shared that I did moment to moment every single day of challenge, where's the support? Criticism, where's the praise? Who's praising me? And when people listening, when you really do that and practice that and go to breakthrough and really learn that skill, it's life-changing. You need it almost every day. Any interaction with someone, you can right away look for the complementary opposite, and it just keeps you
centered
and grateful. Just grateful that you have both. And if one kid's freaking out, the other one all of a sudden is very loving. And if they're both freaking out, you and your partner can be having a moment. It's good to look for it. It really is. I think it keeps us like healthy.
Well, it does. It's exactly what it does. One of the reasons I love teaching the breakthrough experience is because I love seeing the light bulbs go on when people go, oh, now I get it. I see it. My God, it's been there the whole time. And I was comparing my current reality to a fantasy about how I think it should be instead of honoring the way it is. The magnificence of the way it is far greater than the fantasies we impose on life. When we finally get to understand how it actually is, it's absolutely inspiring. And yeah, relationships are a great way of helping you learn how to be authentic. Because if you look down on people and exaggerate yourself with pride, and you're too proud to admit what you see in them inside you and you resent them, well, you're not your authentic self. You're proud. It's a facade. It's a persona. It's a mask you're wearing over the true essence of your being. And when you minimize yourself and look up to them with goo-goo eyes and fear their loss and envy and jealous and all that because you're minimizing yourself and you're shamed and intimidated by their wowness, then you automatically are now minimizing and putting on another facade. You're not being you. So if you're not being you because you're oscillating between pride and shame and exaggerating and minimizing yourself, how are you going to love you and how is somebody else going to love you when you're not even being you? That's a very interesting thing to think about. Because so many times we've got so many facades and inauthenticities that we go around and say we want to be loved for who we are, but we're not even willing to be that individual. And that's why the Demartini method and the breakthrough experience, I'm certain, can help put people on a path where they can actually love and appreciate their wholeness and not have to put on the facade. And it is liberating to embrace your hero and your villain, your saint and your sinner, your virtue and your vice, and transcend the moral hypocrisies of one-sided thinking and believing. And it's freedom. It's a tremendous freedom.
And that really connects to when people have kind of a breakdown in their health or depression or anxiety. It's because they're living in that one-sided way or not really owning the other side of themselves. And it creates that symptom.
Absolutely. I was with a gentleman in the Swiss Hotel on Market Street in Sydney, Australia. And he was the head of a foundation. He'd written a book on depression and got, I think, 28 celebrities that had claimed to have depression, and he interviewed them. And he was quite famous in the city, and he had a big foundation, had a lot of endorsements, and he was very popular. But he had a major depression and was on medication and believed that the pharmaceutical route was the only solution. And he was promoting it. And one of my students who had been to Breakthrough and who had been working in psychology and who had started using the Demartini method on a lot of the clients over the last few years realized that I'm going to call him up and I'm going to have a conversation with him. And then the lady organized a meeting with this guy for me to meet with him at the hotel. And he was looking forward to meet me. I was looking forward to meet him. But I asked him the simple question. Do you believe, because you're a respected leader in the field of psychology and depression, that you would want to know every possible science or vehicle to help somebody with depression? He goes, absolutely. I said, are you familiar with the method that I've developed, the Demartini method? He goes, no, I'm not. I said, do you believe that it might be wise to at least be exposed to it just in case it could help somebody? He goes, okay, what exactly is it? I started to describe it. He said, well, that's a conditional thing and none of that works. It's always pharmaceuticals the only thing that works. And I said, hold off. I know you're getting funded by the pharmaceutical industry right now, and that's made your foundation well, but let's just stop. In fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to take a few minutes since we've got this lunch period pegged off. Let's go to the moment when you were suicidal that you wrote about in your book. He says, I'd rather not. I said, I'll show you something. Go there. Okay. We took him there and he went down there. He was reluctant, but he did. I said, now you're depressed because you're comparing your current reality to the way you wish it would be. It wasn't the way you wanted. And what had happened is he was in a job. He was his goal was to rise up and become the leader of that particular position. And all of a sudden they brought in a new individual to take that position. He felt backstabbed. And then the guy felt that this guy was trying to get and take over, and there was conflict, and he got fired. And his entire career path, he felt, was undermined. It was unfair, and that's when his depression began. because he was comparing his life now to what he fantasized it was going to go towards. And I said, go to that moment when you were depressed. Okay, there. Can you see you're comparing what was happening and what happened to the fantasy that you thought should have happened? He said, well, I deserved it. I should have been in that position. I said, I know. But let's take right now, just stop right now. What would have been the downside, the drawback, if you'd gotten that position? Because I can't see any. I said, well, as long as you can't see drawbacks, you have a fantasy. And as long as you compare your reality to a fantasy, you're going to be appreciating it. You're going to have depression. I said, so let's look. What would have been the drawback if you actually got that job, that guy had not come in there, and you'd be leader of that? And he paused and he goes, oh, well, I would be probably limited at $150,000 to $180,000 a year. Okay. Over the last so many years, 8 years, 10 years. Yep. And aren't you now head of a foundation with a best-selling book and having your own outreach? And aren't you being funded? And is your income now more than that? He goes, it's about 4 times that now. I said, so if you had stayed in that position, you would not have become a leader. You would not have met celebrities. You would not be endorsed. You would not have notoriety. You would not be making income. You would rather have gone that? He goes, well, when I think about it, maybe not. What would have been another drawback? Well, I'd be spending my whole life building another company, not anything of my own nature. I said, so now you've got more tax write-offs. You've got more freedom. You've got your own identity. He goes, yeah. I said, what would have been another drawback if you got it? And then he got watery-eyed and he goes, I would not have met the woman that I've been in love with. Wow. Because it was me going through my work and the care I went through for my depression that led me to the woman that I'm with. I said, great. Would have been another drawback. And I made him go through about 17, 18 drawbacks until he literally was in tears. And then I asked him, what's the benefit of what's happening? And he goes, I've got a life. I've got a soon-to-be wife. I've got identity. I'm free. I said, your depression was a comparison of your current reality at the time to a fantasy about how life was supposed to be. It had nothing to do with biochemical imbalances, even though the biochemical imbalances are the byproduct. Because the second you have perceptions that are unmet, your chemistry's off. And your chemistry, as they show right now, are integrative trying to balance it. They have an inherent balancing mechanism. And I sat with him and kind of helped him do it. And now he was in a conflict because he's endorsed by a pharmaceutical company. And I explained to him that moment, right now, after going through all the drawbacks of the fantasy and the benefits of what's happening, and I leveled it, and I put it in equilibrium, I said, now think about that depression. Try to go back to that moment of depression. He couldn't go there. I said, try. I can't find it. Try. It's not there. I know, because your fantasy is busted. You were holding on to a fantasy for the last decade since this happened. And that's why you've been on medication.
How do you know the difference between a fantasy and a goal? So when someone listening to this thinks, I want to get that house, or I want to have what you call more of like a lifestyle, and I want to get into like when you have a value on wealth building, but more feminine if you have a value on wanting that house and the kids, and life's not meeting that for some people, and then they experience depression or the comparison, feeling that life at 45 should be this way, at 30 it should be this way, I should be there. How does someone know if they're living a fantasy or if that's just a goal they want?
Okay, well, there's a thing called objectives, which are neutral, and subjective biases, which are fantasies. And goals are anywhere in between. You can have a goal that's true objective, that's meetable, it's attainable, and a goal that's a fantasy that's unobtainable. And the way you know it's a fantasy is it does not align with your highest values, and you're not spontaneously taking actions in incremental momentum building ways towards achieving it. It is one-sided and has no two sides, which is delusional and fantasy. And the fear of loss of it causes depression and anxiety and the fear of grief. That's a sign that it's an infatuation. When something's neutral, you don't fear the gain and loss of it. You come up with alternative ways and you see it as feedback. But if it's a fantasy, it's some sort of unrealistic expectation. Now, most of those fantasies are a result of subordinating to outer authorities and taking in traditions, conventions, and moralities of outside influencing people that you envy or trying to imitate and look up to. And as long as we compare ourselves to others, instead of compare our own actions to our own highest values, we're going to have fantasies, and we're going to have internal conflicts and uncertainties and self-depreciation. And those are feedback mechanisms to guide us back to authentic objectives. So yeah, that the sign of a fantasy is something that's not balanced. It's not chunked down into small enough bites that you can take actions to get it. And it's got a positive without a negative. It doesn't have a balance, and it's not linked to what's really valuable to you that you spontaneously do. I have my life, my highest value is teaching. Second is probably researching. I spend almost every single hour doing one of those two things. I mean, I've got a next book ready to go here to start on the second I'm off this interview. And I do teaching throughout the day, seminars, webinars, podcasts, writing articles, writing books, writing magazine things. I'm doing it every day. So I spontaneously do that. I love doing that. It's not work for me. It's my mission. Now, I have lots of fantasies that I've had over my life. I want to be like Hugh Hefner, an international sex symbol. But that is no signs of ever happening true. There's no evidence of that. So things that have no evidence are delusional and fantasies and set up futilities. Look at where you have incremental momentum building actions that are towards something that is showing progress and evidence of coming true. And that's where you'll set goals that are achieved. And those are real objectives. Objectivity means even neutral-minded. You're willing to embrace, as the Stoics said, you're willing to embrace the downsides equal to the upsides, the pains and the pleasures in the pursuit of some great purpose that has meaning.
I bet that would give people like a lot of self-love or appreciation for themselves when they live congruently like that, as opposed to always feeling like they're failing or they're not achieving. Like when they get really real with what's important to them, all the noise must drop away or go away.
Well, the noise in the brain, anything you infatuate with or fantasize about or resent and have a nightmare about is going to occupy space and time in your mind.
Right. And
you're not going to sleep very well. And you'll have noise in the mind. When you meditate, the moment you meditate, you'll hear all that noise. That's all the emotions that are polarized trying to become synthesized and integrated. And the brain now, the neuroscience shows that the brain is trying with its amino acid neurotransmitters trying to integrate these pairs. It's doing that consciously. As of today, one great article just came out proving that. So our brain is doing what it can to help us live authentically and not polarized, more synthesized. And that's the key. But we tend to hold on to fantasies. Our amygdala wants a fantasy. Our executive center wants an objective. If we live by priority, we go after objectives. If we live by lower priority, we want immediate gratifying, consumable, addictive, compulsive, immediate gratifying states. And they are the source of a lot of our craziness.
Something that you say that you teach that I share a lot is when you can't sleep at night or people who have insomnia, it's just an imbalance thought or a way that your mind is trying to get into balance. So anytime if I ever have difficulty sleeping or somebody says they're having difficulty sleeping, what are they thinking about? And then go ahead and neutralize that and balance it. And it works every time. It's just our body giving us that feedback.
It's giving us the feedback to let us know that we're subjectively biased. Now, the animal inside us uses subjective bias as a survival strategy. We have what is called false positives and false negatives. If we see an animal in the wild, it's wiser to assume that it's there than not. It's better to have it be there and we just assume that it's there than to assume it's not there and it actually be there because we missed out on food or we got eaten by a predator. So we automatically go into our amygdala area, which is our animal survival center, our desire center. We automatically skew and distort and bias our perspectives. And that's where we get into the idea that, people are all nice or all mean and black and white. You see all these political polarities that's right now in the media. That's all subjective bias of the amygdala. That's not the executive function. That's not objective reason. When Pence and the other lovely lady Harris was having a debate, they were a little bit more executive function compared to when Biden and Trump were up there because they were in their amygdalas. And when we do, we have, a circus instead of a focus.
instead of clear. One question I'd love to know that you mentioned a little earlier of you loving to learn and research. If someone's value or top value is learning and personal growth, I just want to talk from the feminine perspective. How can someone want to be a mother or love learning or love that and have creating wealth when they don't have a value on business? So to live a lifestyle, not to get the value on wealth building if that's not authentically important to them, but they want a certain lifestyle and going to seminars like you speak of, or even learning your work. How can someone create the wealth in order to do that if wealth building is not high on their values?
Well, wealth comes in all 7 areas. There's spiritual wealth, intellectual property wealth, there's business wealth, there's financial wealth, family wealth, social wealth, and business, physical health wealth. So financial wealth is what I'm assuming you're meaning.
Yes.
And you can take any area that's really high in your values and you can figure out a way of structuring your life to get paid to do it. If you are very much a socialite, there's ways of leveraging your social contacts for economics. If you're an intellectual pursuer, you can package that intellectual property and make a fortune. I just closed a deal with Nightingale Conant, it looks like this week, and they're going to take all of my CDs and DVDs and repackage them and put them in a new library format and sell them to their millions of people. So I can take intellectual property and now package that. I can also take social contacts that I know and leverage those social contacts, the people you know, and get involved in deals, as many politicians do. Or I could be physically attractive. I know a woman that was so stunning, amazingly stunning, that she had the audacity to refuse to go out on a date with anybody that didn't have $500 million. And she got it. She had people lined up, 3 guys that were open billionaires lined up. And she wouldn't even go on a date unless they put down at least $500 million just for the date. And it wasn't for escorts. It wasn't for sexuality. It was just to go on a date because she valued her beauty. So there's many ways of capitalizing on the other forms of wealth and convert it into, financial wealth. But you have to have a value on financial wealth to even have the creative ideas and conversion to convert them. But I know women that want to be very fortunate. I'm working with a woman right now that his net worth is about $200 million. And she's now working on dating a guy that's worth about $1.2 billion. And she has built her wealth out of relationships. And she's married, and then her husband died, and she got a fortune. And she's now going to marry, and he'll probably die and get a fortune. So there's many strategies of financial wealth. I don't want to make any better or worse or good or bad. I don't want to put those on there. I just say that if you have a value on wealth building, whatever forms of assets you have in the areas that's highest on your value currently can be converted into that. And you can empower all areas and convert it into cash if you ask the right questions. If you ask, where's my assets in those areas and how do I convert them into cash? You can convert all those assets you have into capital, financial capital. So I've trained people on how to do that. I put together a 2-day program one time just on that. And it was quite astonishing in how many people came up with ways of making a fortune out of things they never thought of before.
You tell a story about, I don't know if it was a Taco Bell dog, but that woman in one of your breakthroughs that loved her dog so much and she ended up making a fortune just off dressing up her dog.
Yes, she ended up with $25 million out of a dog. It was actually a milk-bone dog biscuit, commercial lady. And she made a fortune out of being with her dog. And she loved her dog and she respected her dog. And she learned how, at the breakthrough experience, she learned how to convert that into capital. And she made $25 million out of a dog, which I thought was interesting. And he became one of the most famous dogs in America because of it.
Well, I love that program. If we're speaking of programs, where can people listening kind of connect with you and get in touch to know what kind of programs or when the next breakthrough is? I think they're all online now, which is great. And
yeah, if you go on to drdemartini.com, DRDEMARTINI.com, drdemartini.com. You can probably spend the rest of your life. You're going to have to actually believe you're a Buddhist, believing in reincarnation, to be able to have the time to just look at everything that's on there. It's vast.
Right.
But there are hundreds of articles, radio shows, interviews, TV shows, media, podcast, YouTube things, filled with education that can help you empower your life in these areas. But there's also a value determination area that is a complementary thing that I would encourage you to do. Just go to the drdemartini.com, look for how to determine your values, and take 30 minutes of your time and go through a simple questionnaire. It's private. It's to you. No one will see it. And what it's going to do is help you define what's really priority for you. In case you think you know what it is, it may not be what you think. So go and do it. It's an objective scanning mechanism to help you find out what's really important and how to prioritize your life so you can live empowering yourself, not disempowering it. But if you go there, they can find out where I'm doing live seminars, where the breaks or experiences. I do those quite regularly. I used to do those 43 times a year. Now with COVID, it's a little bit less because we're doing them in similar time zones, but we're online now. But please take advantage of that, drdemartini.com. It's an educational website, and I'm absolutely certain there's information on there that could help and empower and upgrade the opportunities in your life.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time today and everything that you've done for my life and everybody's life that connects to me. It's really inspiring.
Yeah. Thank you for your great questions. I can see that you did your homework and you prepared. So thank you so much. Can I say one more thing?
Of course, yes.
Whoever's listening, when you look in the mirror, just know that no matter what you've ever done or not done, you're still worthy of love. And I want you to go inside and realize that. Quit comparing yourself to others. Quit comparing yourself to your ideal fantasies. And just for a moment, get present with the magnificence of who you are. And give yourself permission to do something extraordinary. The real, true you is magnificent and extraordinary already. Allow yourself to be you. The most authentic you is the empowered you. And just know that you deserve to have what it is that's innermost dominant thought that you dream of.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Extraordinary Living Podcast. For show notes for this episode and all past episodes, head over to JackieSenatori.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Until then, take care and be well.